My name is Charlie O'Donnell, and I'm a partner at Brooklyn Bridge Ventures, and I'm super excited to be interviewing my younger brother, Scott O'Donnell. Only slightly younger, though.
Yeah.
Scott has been in and around the financial world for almost
Since
as long as I've been around. 1982.
Yeah.
And we're gonna just have kind of a casual conversation about everything from just general business to a little bit of market stuff. And I've got a couple of questions for him about dealing with customers and training people and just the management in general. So
I like talking about management. It's a very interesting topic, and I'm honestly very excited about this.
Cool. So, Scott, just give us a little bit of background for the people who are my followers who maybe don't know that much about you.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I am basically street educated, street smart. I do not have formal college education, but I've been in the business world since 1982. I started with Waterhouse Securities back then when it was a very small company. And I was honestly a primary factor in building that company up. I worked there from 82 to 98. I became a branch manager in 1986. I became a regional VP when I was 30 years old in 1992. When I was regional VP, I was running the whole Midwest region and basically grew that region from a single branch, my Chicago branch, into 20 branches. Each of those 20 branch managers were people I had hired, trained, and basically mentored into their positions. I'm very proud of that. I think I had a very significant impact on a lot of people's lives.
Let me ask you a quick question, actually,
Yeah.
because you mentioned it. Do you think there's anything that you could have learned in a formal business education in 1982 that would even be relevant today?
Yes, I do, because I think there were certain building blocks as far as the way you communicate with people, the way you present yourself, just being, managing, I like to say managing from the heart and being genuine. And I think those are traditional time-honored traits that I think transcend time, basically. So yeah.
So you had to pick those up on the job?
Absolutely.
Gotcha. And you basically continued that in your career. More recently, you were, also managing people in the financial sector.
Yeah, so actually I had left the business world in 1998 and decided to, try different things at that point. Unfortunately, I had a major health issue a couple of years after that, which really sidetracked me for a while. I ended up coming back into the business world in 2008 and had to start from scratch because I had been out for 10 years. Had to get all my licenses again, literally came in at an entry-level customer service position, making $30,000 a year, which was, a tough pill to swallow at the time. But I was able to work myself back into being a branch manager, and I've been a branch manager since 2010 now with TD Ameritrade. And it's been an interesting ride, I would say.
So you actually mentioned to me that there were other folks in the organization that in your previous job were under you and that you had trained or that you had hired as managers and stuff like that. How do you, as somebody who brings a lot of experience but is sort of working your way back up, like how do you just deal with that emotionally, mentally, and all that sort of stuff?
Well, I will say that that's something I've encountered since I came back into the industry, first with E-Trade and now with TD Ameritrade. I have a saying that you've got to put your ego in your pocket, and you have to put your ego in your pocket, right? So initially, I think it was something where, it made me question some of the decisions I had made in the past and things like that. But I believe you need to look forward. And so it's not anything I've been bitter about, jealous about, or anything along those lines. Interestingly enough, I recently found out that my current manager at TD Ameritrade, at least he was my current manager until about a month ago, was hired by someone who I had hired back in the day. So that
So your grandchildren at the company.
Yeah. What's interesting is the brokerage industry is actually a pretty small industry, and you're going to run across people who you've ran across in the past. And again, I made a decision to leave the business world for 10 years. Health was part of it. I don't have any regrets because during that period, it enabled me to spend a lot of time with my family. My children were a lot younger back then. So I believe everything happens for a reason. And I have no regrets, honestly, And that being said, I guess I would not be totally truthful if at times I didn't have that thought like, wow, if only I had stayed in the industry, I probably would be retired by now, But that being said, I hate this term, but it is what it is. And, I'm happy for those people. And it's not an issue for me at all.
Well, and also it should be a little bit of like a point of pride too, because to some extent that means you were a good manager, you were good at hiring, because imagine coming back to an industry years later and if no one you had hired was still in the business,
well, that's true.
It's actually better that those people are still thriving. It says something about you as a manager and somebody who was hiring and training people.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit more about training and management. When you've hired a bunch of people across your career, what would you generally say are some of the traits and skills that you're hiring? Because you've hired everybody from new managers to just entry level, brokers. What are some of the things that you look for when you sit across the table from somebody?
So I've always had a mantra when it comes to hiring people, and it's hire personality, not experience. Because I always felt that I could teach and train people to do the job, but I couldn't teach and train them to be the people who they are, okay? So I always were looking for quality people who I felt would be humble, open to learning, people who would fit in with the team. I was fortunate enough to have such a great environment when I was running my branch back in the day that when new people came in, they realized that they had to step up because everybody else around them was. And I was fortunate also to be in a situation where we were a growing company. There was a lot of promotion opportunities, particularly if people were willing to relocate. We were focusing on hiring younger people, and we were a young company. And so honestly, communication skills, I think, are very important. Having the right sort of personality, again, people who are not full of themselves, people who are not full of spit. And that's what I look for when I'm trying to hire people. I believe being genuine is not only a characteristic that is very, very important in managing people in the business world, it's obviously a characteristic that's important in life. And obviously, I think there's a lot of parallels there. And I think that's kind of, if I'm answering your question, I think that's kind of what I look for.
So how do you deal with connecting and hiring sort of across generations now? I mean, you and I, it's funny because there were times when, I was the younger guy around the table, and I'm sure people were probably complaining about, oh, these young kids or whatever. And now that I'm getting pitches from entrepreneurs who are realistically almost 20 years younger than me at this point, it's clear that, every generation has their differences and traits. you've recently been in a position to hire, train, mentor some of these younger, sort of 20 somethings. What are some of the challenges and what are some of the ways that you found to be successful in doing that?
Great question. And before I answer that, I'll make one point. I was always the kid. I started when I was 20 years old in 1982. And now I've gone full circle. Now I'm the old man, basically. But hiring and managing millennials is a challenge. It's a challenge initially that I don't think I was fully prepared for. But again, I think it goes down to communication. I had hired a millennial about a year ago. And at first, I was really taken aback at what I perceived to be a little bit of a lack of respect, like him not responding to me in the way I was used to having people respond to me, basically. In other words, giving me respect and honoring and doing what I asked them to do. So I decided to have a one-on-one with this particular person, and I let him know how I felt. And I said, look, obviously I'm having some issues communicating with you. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like you to tell me how you would like me to communicate with you when I see certain things that you are doing or not doing. What is the way you want me to approach you? How do you want me to approach you? So I kind of put the ball back in his court, basically. So I think that made an impact to him. And
he probably had never thought about it before.
Say that again?
He probably had never thought about it before.
No, right. And it actually made a difference, right? So his answer to me was, hey, just make sure you pull me aside and, let me know what's on your mind and we'll talk about it. And I said, yeah, that's great. I was managing in a small office, and when you manage in a small office, sometimes, it's kind of like a family. So you will communicate with people about things that maybe normally in a bigger operation you would do on a one-on-one, but just more in an open environment. But he preferred to have a one-on-one and wanted me to be direct with him. And from that point on, I think things worked out pretty good, even though he ended up moving on to another position. But initially that was a real challenge because I was not used to having someone basically not respond to what I was asking them to do. And he just wanted to carve out his own path, basically,
Gotcha. So I'd be curious how the adjustment to the virtual and remote from home and all of that. You've basically, throughout your career for a long time, worked in a pretty traditional office environment, a lot of front-facing time dealing with customers. This year's obviously been a big shift. What are some of the ways that you've learned to kind of transitions? What have been some of the positives and some of the negatives about it?
Yeah, so right in the beginning, I decided that we were going to do 2 group meetings a day. We would have one group meeting in the morning after what is referred to as my tier 2 huddle. My tier 2 huddle is a huddle with all of the managers in the region and my regional manager. So I felt like the first phone meeting was proper to have after that huddle. Obviously, I can share information, set expectations for the day, review numbers and things of that nature. And then at the end of the day, we would have a follow-up huddle. And in that huddle, we would talk about some of the successes and challenges that we had throughout the day, how we were progressing towards our goals. We had certain basic goals, minimum of 10 contacts a day, minimum of 3 goal plans a day, things of that nature. So at the end of the day, we would communicate again, as a team. And again, it's always been collaborative. I believe a collaborative management style has been one of the keys to my success. And again, that goes to putting my ego in my pocket, understanding that the best people who are going to judge me as a manager are the people who I'm managing, getting open and honest feedback from them, setting the right environment where they feel comfortable giving me that open and honest feedback, and that I think has proven to be very valuable. There's no one who can judge your management style better than the people who you're managing. And I think if people realize that and solicit that sort of feedback and respond to that, that's going to make them a better manager. And I think that's been one of the keys to my management style and effectiveness.
Cool. Well, so I'm going to ask you a little bit about something that is actually a big difference between you and I. I don't think I would ever be able to work in a customer-facing position. And you've been dealing with customers your entire career, people whose finances, their retirement, their savings, like really, really important stuff you're dealing with. So I'm sure a lot of them, the seriousness level of the conversations with them, is really high. And I probably don't have very much tolerance for being in a customer-facing position. What do you think? And I'm sure you've probably seen, actually, people that you've hired, some of them are much more successful at it than others.
Yeah.
Just one, like, why do you like customer-facing positions, and what do you think makes you able to do it?
So let me make a couple of comments on that. I think, first of all, I always say most of the people who you deal with are interesting, intelligent, good people to work with. And like one bad apple, unfortunately, makes you feel like, oh, all my customers are that way. That's not the case. But it's interesting that the bad or difficult customers are the ones that really stand out, okay? So again, it goes to putting your ego in your pocket again. And I like people. I like helping people. I like teaching people. I like working with people. And I approach my interactions with clients, again, from being very genuine. Mm-hmm. And that is something I think people really respect and enjoy. And I would say the vast majority of my clients I have awesome relationships with. And it's really, it's fun. It's interesting. And I learn from them, okay? I learn from my clients, okay? And I think that is something too, that when you're dealing with literally dozens of people a day, you can glean certain things from each of those conversations. And, again, if you approach things with an open mind and that, I can align with this person. There are different personality types, right? You got your empathizers, you got your controllers, you got your performers, right? You got your analyzers. So it's important to identify the client's personality type, if you will. And some of them are obviously going to be a combination of those. Mm-hmm. And then aligning yourself to deal with that client. Of course, I'm going to deal with the 80-year-old widow a lot differently than I'm going to deal with the 35-year-old lawyer, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of aligning yourself, communicating, respecting, earning respect. And you need to earn respect in the different ways you're going to earn respect. You earn respect through your knowledge. You earn respect by the way you communicate to people. And once you have that respect of your clients, your employees, it makes everything else easier. And the last thing, honestly, and I think this is something applies to dealing with customers or dealing with employees or associates, I should say, you need to have a sense of humor. And that is really important. I've learned that throughout the years. I had a manager one time who I thought was a very weak manager, but he had a great sense of humor and everyone loved him. They overlooked his management flaws because he was just a very funny, very entertaining, interesting guy. Now, that's not going to replace everything, but it's part of the puzzle, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously spending a lot of time at work day in and day out, you want it to be as least stressful as possible. And if somebody could just, raise that enjoyment level, even just a half a notch, that makes it a lot easier.
On our Friday meetings, we always did trivia at the end of the meeting, And it was just a little thing, but it was always fun. And we were always looking forward to our little trivia challenge. And, little things like that, I think, go a long way.
So I also wanted to ask you a few questions, not related to any kind of advice or anything like that, but you've been a long-time participant in the market. And one thing that I've noticed is, as people watch the market go up and they watch these numbers and all that sort of stuff, and there's a lot of people who, spending a lot of time online, spending some time at home, wondering whether they should be doing something. Obviously, there's been a lot of volatility in the market, but as somebody who has been in the financial markets a long time, what are some of the basics that you tell the average person who says, hey, like, I don't feel particularly knowledgeable. I feel like maybe I'm missing out, or I'm not optimized, or not doing what I should be. Where do I get where do I get started in this market? I feel like everybody around me is making all sorts of money. What are some of the just basic things you feel from being an experienced person who's been through, several market cycles? What's the 101 you tell people about the stock market?
Sure. Well, I mean, it starts out with trying to identify the level of risk that you're comfortable with and what your time horizon is, right? And, the reality of the stock market is, over time, the stock market has historically always been the best performing place to have your money. One of the interesting things that's developed since the pandemic started, with people at home and sports shut down for a while, the market more than ever has become the online casino. And there's a lot of gambling that is tied in with that. And I'll be frank, I'm guilty of that as well. I have an account right now that I'm doing a lot of option trading with, and I'm trying to make educated choices, and so far it's been working out. But the reality is, for someone who's not an expert, it's first of all identifying those goals, identifying your risk tolerance, identifying the time horizon. And the best way to put your money to work is either turn it over to a professional. If you're not going to do that, I preach what we call a core and satellite strategy. So a core and satellite strategy basically means the core, the majority of your dollars are going to be put to work in either mutual funds or exchange traded funds, okay? And that's where you're getting exchange traded funds. ETFs for short is basically index investing. Mutual funds are more professionally managed. You're going to pay higher fees in a mutual fund. But setting up, pick a large cap fund, pick a small cap fund, pick a mid cap fund, pick an international fund, pick a bond fund, maybe a little bit of gold, and then sprinkle in your satellites. But the majority is core, and then the individual stock picks are satellites. And again, you need to be patient. Over time, the market has, again, historically been the best place for your money to grow. And you've got to, I hate to use this term, but it's so cliche, but you've got to see the forest and not get blinded by the trees. And I think that's one of the keys to successful investing, is being patient, having a plan, understanding, what works best for you from a risk tolerance standpoint, and letting the market and time do its thing.
Gotcha. So last question before we go. You've been involved in a lot of training and kind of mentoring people over time, and in the hiring process as well. What do you think people need to think about when they build good training programs? Like, you've been in a bunch of different environments, and a lot of my audience is startups that are literally just starting from scratch, right? They're going from one person to 5 people to 10, and before they know it, it's 50 or 100, and they may not even have had time to put in all of the sort of training and continuing education stuff. What are some of the things that you take with you from your corporate experience that you would say, hey, these are the kinds of things that are most useful to people?
Good question. I think, first of all, most people, particularly adults, learn by doing, okay? Hands on the keyboard, I like to say. So I think that's the most effective type of training. You can put things in print, you can put training materials for them to read together, but people learn by doing. They learn by having their fingers on the keyboard. So that's the first thing. And then there needs to be, again, communication and feedback and follow-up. And I think there needs to be goals set with training as well. So, let's say we have a goal planning tool, and it's a very effective tool, but it's a complicated tool. And it's a tool that, you have to put some work into in order to learn how to use it effectively. So, initially we watched some videos and stuff to kind of get an overview. But the real learning went when we got into the practice environment, again, literally with the fingers on the keyboard. And then as we were going through the process, we would gather and talk about it. Again, what's working for you, what's not working for you, what are the challenges you're having? Let's share our experiences. Let's share our successes. Let's share our challenges. And again, I hate to use the same word again, but collaborative. It's got to be collaborative. It's not just me training you. I always say that if you're training someone, two people are being trained, right? You being the trainer, you're actually learning how to teach people, how to get feedback from people, how to communicate to people. So I think training is a two-way street. And the most important thing, obviously, other than the having the right material and resources, is the communication around that training.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, listen, Scott, this has been fun.
This has been great. I've enjoyed
it. Thanks for making the time. I really appreciate it.
You're making the time for me. This is more for my benefit. And I guess we can have this on a recorded line where I want to say I'm proud of you and I love you.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate you doing this for me.
Thanks so much. Hey, I'm learning at the same time.